to Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we're broadcasting live on December 12th from the studios of WMNF in Tampa. And we're going to focus today on Florida's environment this hour. Later on in the show, we're going to hear that an effort to get a water referendum on Florida's ballot next year has fallen short, but we'll hear from organizers that their plan to get the right to clean water amendment on Florida's 2026 ballot instead. That's later on in the show, so I hope you stay tuned for that. But first up, we're going to hear about efforts to stop a proposed development in prime Florida panther habitat in eastern Collier County. It's called Bellmar, and joining us now by Zoom to talk about this are Michael McGrath, who is Sierra Club's Florida lead organizer, and Marcella Zarita, a resident of eastern Collier County. She's active in issues concerning developments that might impact nearby wildlife and her neighbors. So I want to welcome you both to Tuesday Cafe, Michael and Marcella.
Hey, Sean, good to be here.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. So let's begin with the setting for what we'll be talking about. Tell us about how big and where is the proposed Bellmar development?
Sure, thanks for that, Sean. So Bellmar is situated over in eastern Collier County, right? And this is something that would add more than 4,000 homes, and also with it, more cars onto our roadways within eastern Collier County. Estimates say that there probably could be up to 45,000 additional daily vehicle trips going through rural roads here in this part of Southwest Florida. Just to provide some context if folks are trying to imagine where this is, it's only about a mile from the Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge. If folks are familiar with the Ave Maria community, situated right around there on Oilwell Road. This is something that really right is in the heart of panther habitat, right in the Western Everglades, and really is something that would be disastrous and create a new sprawling community, a cookie-cutter community in Southwest Florida.
Yeah, and that's the voice of Michael McGrath, Sierra Club Florida lead organizer. We also have on our Zoom with us right now Marcella Zarita, a resident of eastern Collier County. So Marcella, maybe you could describe a little bit more about what's this area like? It's kind of rural, very rural, I would say. It's not far from the Everglades. There's a lot of wetlands. How else would you describe your community?
It's, can you hear me?
Yes, you sound fine.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Well, I live on the rural area of the Golden Gate States, and I am surrounded by all this public lands, and it's a low-density community, and we surrounded by all this wildlife, and especially the Florida panther, and I actually, they use our community to be able to go into the public lands. And unfortunately, we have all this sprawl, because that's what these villages are here in Eastern Collier. It is the opposite what the RLSA initially was created for. Back in 1999, the state, everybody, was content with this preservation, how much land it was going to be preserved, and within years, they changed that. It was never intended to have this much development in these sensitive areas.
And it's sensitive in part because it's wetlands, but also in part because the Florida panther, this is the main area for where the Florida panther is. Michael, maybe you could describe what we know about where the panther lives and where it lives regarding this proposed development, and how much room that panthers need to live.
Sure, thanks for that, Sean. I think it's really important for folks to realize that the Florida panther utilizes a mosaic of public and also private lands, right? And also working landscapes as well, agricultural lands. So, to the south of Bellmar, we know we have the Florida Panther National Wildlife Refuge there. We also have the Big Cypress National Preserve and the Fakahatchee Preserve. And then north of there, we also have various public lands as part of the Crew lands, which are the coastal regional watershed lands that are located within Lee County and also Collier County, right? So you can see that there is this wildlife corridor, right? And that really it's actually, all these lands are actually part of the this shared vision to create the Florida Wildlife Corridor, something that would go from the Okefenokee Swamp all the way down to the Western Everglades, right? So these are critically important lands. And we know from the state agencies and their research using telemetry data, right, which is basically the radio collars that go on to panthers. That these are lands that the panthers utilize very regularly, right? If Bellmar was developed, right, and again, I can't underscore this enough. Bellmar is 100% in the primary panther zone habitat, and also 100% in the Florida Wildlife Corridor. There's estimates that it would take about 3 to 4 panthers per year, right? And then, when you add to the fact that we're also going to be adding all these different road cars on the roadways and in an area where there's not as much frequent traffic, because there's not people out there already, we're going to see more and more vehicular collisions with the Florida panther. This year alone, according to FWC, there's already been 13 documented panther deaths. So if we continue to do things like this, we're going to see that number increase in the years to come.
So potentially 4,000 homes in this area that's prime panther habitat, but you're part of several environmental groups who have filed for a temporary restraining order?
That's correct. Yes. So the EPA, Earth Justice on behalf of Sierra Club and also the Center for Biological Diversity made a motion for a temporary restraining order for the two 404 wetland permits that we were trying to challenge for 2 different developments. So the first ones we're talking about right now with Bellmar, right? The other one is another development over in southeastern Lee County, near again those cruise lands I was referring to earlier, called Kingston, right? And basically, our hope is that they'll be briefed and also argued in court in the coming months and help delay the permitting of these developments.
Our guests are Michael McGrath, Sierra Club Florida lead organizer, and Marcella Zarita, a resident of Eastern Collier County, and we're talking about proposed development in Florida panther habitat. Just a reminder that coming up later in the show, we're going to hear about an effort to add to the Florida Constitution a right to clean water. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we're broadcasting from the studios of WMNF in Tampa. And just a moment ago, Michael, you mentioned something called a 404 wetlands permit. So for those of us who aren't familiar with that term, what is that?
Sure. So a 404 wetland permit basically is something that you have to get through through FDP, Florida's Department of Environmental Protection, right, in order to develop a private property of land, right? It basically takes into consideration the impacts that it could have if you were to dredge and fill that wetland and also create a new development. What's really important for the audience to understand is that this used to be a program that was actually federally administered by the EPA and also by the Army Corps of Engineers. Back during the waning days of the Trump administration, they actually transferred the authority of the 404 wetland program actually to the state, to FDEP. And really, this was a gift for developers, right? It actually has helped to actually streamline the processing of this and also make it easier for them to have federal oversight with trying to get these 404 wetland permits. And we know the reason why this is done, because developers are lining the pockets of the current leadership within at federal levels at the time, and also within the state here in Florida as well. And basically, it's a way for the way that the rules have been set up makes it easier for developers to actually get authorization to dredge and fill wetlands, as we see on places like Bellmar, so that they don't have to have as much red tape for trying to develop these very ecologically sensitive lands.
I want to bring Marcella back into this conversation. And Marcella, the proposed development, it's called Bellmar. It's in the neighborhood where you live, near the neighborhood where you live in East Collier County, this rural area, which is near the Florida Wildlife Corridor and it's completely in Florida panther habitat. So would you be concerned about increased traffic there and potentially more vehicle strikes with panthers and other damage to wildlife in your neighborhood?
Absolutely. We have actually already had the issue. We have brought out to the county and every single meeting that they have for these villages, Rivergrass, that Immokalee Road, our area, it's not, even our schools are overcrowded, and it just, it can't support this much traffic that they're planning to bring, and especially where, the panthers are, like the hotspots for example, Immokalee Road Village. That's another village that they're trying to build that right in the middle heart of the Corkscrew Swamp, all this land that are surrounded to it. And it's a hotspot for panthers, and they're planning to build with the high density. They continue to rezone, change, to make sure that the developers make a profit. They say very openly at the meetings, at the public meetings, that right now, it's not profitable. So they change the rules, they change all this stuff, rezoning to make it profitable for the developers. And one thing they forget is that, wildlife, it's a public trust, they're supposed to protect it. We gave them we put them in that position to, listen to the public. I remember the meeting at the River Grass Village, which was the first one that started all these villages after that. That room, they have to open the third floor because it was full of people against this project. But the commissioners, they ignore it. And, there's the data. They were supposed to, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, they were supposed to do a study every 5 years, for the panthers, and they haven't done it. But yeah, they continue, not authorizing and giving permits. And I hope that this time, because there is no other place left for them. This is it. This is the last place for the Florida panthers. And it is a concern not just for the Floridians, but it should be a concern because it's in a species that it's close to go to an extinction, and this will be a jeopardy project. And I hope that the permit gets denied.
That's Marcela Zarita, a resident, that is, of Eastern Collier County. We are also speaking with Michael McGrath, Sierra Club Florida lead organizer. We're talking about a proposed development in Florida panther habitat. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, broadcasting from the studios of WMNF in Tampa. The developer told the Naples Daily News, he said this: Collier Enterprises is dedicated to being good stewards of the environment and has committed to preserving 12,000 acres of high-quality wildlife habitat as part of the town of Big Cypress, Bellmar Village, and Rivergrass Village projects. So, Marcela, there will be these 12,000 acres that will be protected. So isn't that a good thing?
It would be a good thing if it will be elsewhere, not right next to a refuge of an animal that it's close to go to an extinction. There is no conservation if it leads to extinction. If we're paving the way, we know that this place, the Conservancy have gave them options where it would be best. The panthers, they don't know that they have to go to the specific areas that they're supposed, because that's where we are assigning to. They don't know that. If they're building on primary panther habitat, the wildlife, they don't know that. I live in this area. I see the Wildlife Hill Road every morning, every time when I come back from work. There is no wildlife crossing. They're working on some of them, but I recall on one of the meetings for the Immokalee Road Village, at the last minute, the applicant, they did change and did not want, they agreed at the beginning that they will assist with the wildlife crossing. And then at the last minute for the voting, they back up. So it's, and besides the crossings as well, they don't, they do it either at the end of a project and not at the construction at the beginning. The location, it's bad. You like I said, you cannot say that you're going to conserve this much land and, while you're building on mainland. If you look at the satellite, this area, it's dark. It's black. Like you won't see anything else. This is where all the wildlife is. And, and like I said, they don't know that, you're going to be building, we're talking about the possibility of being twice the size of Fort Lauderdale, and so what are we doing? We're just going to save a little bit of piece of land while we're destroying the majority of it. That's something that we got to think, because it's not about right now, it's about future generations, because the panthers, just not if you look at into a whole picture of what the people before me, did everything to conserve this. It's also their habitat. It's also what it gives us, and that's one thing that I think that we need to take account as well. Saving the Florida panther, saving us as well for future generations.
So a few times in this conversation, we've talked about potentially the Florida panther going extinct with increased development in Southwest Florida. But maybe, Michael, you can tell us about what do we know about population numbers for the Florida panther and habitat needs, and where the direction of the Florida panther population is going.
Sure. So, first we'll say around the Florida panther that there's maybe around 120 to 230 panthers left in the wild. I think when we're talking about endangered species that is so significant and special as the Florida panther, we're talking about the South Florida ecosystem still today, right? We should always be erring on the side of caution, right? We're always using the lower estimates field to inform our biological opinions about, the continued recovery of this of the species. But frankly, the biological opinion that has been released by Fish and Wildlife Service of the other developments that be happening in addition to Bellmar within the region, talking about Lee County, Hendry County, Glades County, and Collier County, right? All these communities have mega development.
Michael, you seem to have some buffering problems. Maybe if you turned your video off, your audio might improve. Sorry to interrupt you there, but we'll come back to you. And let's go right now to Marcella. And
I'm being promoted next Thursday, right?
Let's ask Marcella about the development that Michael mentioned earlier, and it's called Kingston. So far we've been talking mostly about this Bellmar proposed development, but what do you know about the Kingston development that's proposed?
I know a little bit. That's another project that it's a big no-no in my opinion. Because the same thing, the problem right now, what we're going through with having all these communities and high density being built is that there is not enough contribution from the developers when it comes to schools, traffic, the environment. There's a lot of things that have been changed. And I think that all this is coming now to Florida. Not that it was planned, because if we go back to the initial plans, it's the contrary for what was presented to the public. I think that the big issue here is that we don't have like a department to oversee these projects. I think once Rick Scott, at the time he was the government, he dismantled the Department of Community Affairs. That was the Florida's growth management law, where, it would go over everything: traffic, schools, wildlife, endangered species, the water quality, all that stuff. And we don't have that. Every time we go to these meetings as the public, every time we go, it's always the same issue. And there is no solution. We just continue building. And I mean, this is another urban sprawl. It's just sprawl. And it's just a profit for the developers, in my opinion.
Our guests are Marcella Zarita, a resident of Eastern Collier County, and Michael McGrath, Sierra Club Florida lead organizer. We're talking about a proposed development in Florida panther habitat in Southwest Florida in Collier County. I want to remind people that coming up later in the show, we're going to hear about an effort to add to the Florida Constitution a right to clean water. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan. We're broadcasting from WMNF. And Michael, let me ask you about other species that might be impacted if there's more development there in Southwest Florida. Tell us about the crested caracara and how it might be impacted by less habitat and other issues concerning development.
Sure. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound great. Thanks.
Okay, great. So yeah, on the Bellmar site, there is actually a documented case of a pair of breeding caracara on the site, right? And if this were to go through, they would lose over half of their foraging habitat site that they actually need to actually sustain themselves, right? Having those forage sites and locations is extremely important for the caracara so that they can actually continue to maintain their healthy level of fitness. they can continue to breed and have offspring, to basically maintain a healthy population. If you take away the forage site, they're going to create more interspecies conflicts with other character in the region, and it'll continue to dwindle in numbers. So this is just another example of a really iconic and also special species of great concern here in Florida. That's only found here in our state, and with every year passing, its range becomes more and more encroached upon by development.
And earlier you mentioned the Florida Wildlife Corridor, which is a proposed area of nature from the north to south Florida. How close is this development to that proposed wildlife corridor, and how would development of this proposed Bellmar development, how would that impact whether or not the Florida Wildlife Corridor becomes a reality?
Sure. So for folks who weren't here earlier in the conversation, I just want to again underscore that Bellmar is 100% within the Florida Wildlife Corridor, right? This is something that state leadership, both of the governor and also the legislature, have made a priority for Florida to help connect our mixed mosaic of public and also private lands, so we can make sure that this is something that's enjoyed by all Floridians for generations to come. This development is 100% primary panther habitat, right? And I think it can't be underscored enough is that when you look at the landowner who is trying to develop this Collier Enterprises, they do have land that they own the title to that is actually outside of the Florida Wildlife Corridor, right? So if they wanted to be better stewards of the land, right, and actually do things that would be good for conservation ethic and helping to secure this shared vision for the Florida Wildlife Corridor, they should be developing lands that are outside of that, right? And this is good for a myriad of reasons also, right? Because this is also going to be putting people closer to the urban centers where the jobs are, right? And also will allow them to create more affordable and also workforce housing as well in that part of Collier County and Southwest Florida, right? We shouldn't be causing more burdens for our residents to be able to have these long commutes if they're trying to look for affordable housing or also for more places to live. We should be putting them closer to their urban core so we can cut down on that transit time and also commute times for folks, and not have folks spend more money on gas and also their depreciating car upkeep.
We're speaking right now about the potential Florida panther habitat being destroyed by a proposed development in Southwest Florida, and we're broadcasting from the studios of WMNF in Tampa live on December 12th here, and we have a couple of emails we can read. You're listening to Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan. First of all, Rich in Brooksville comments on something that Marcella was talking about earlier. He says that light pollution is real and it wipes out insects, animals, and wildlife in general. We need to take it very seriously. So thanks for that comment, Rich. And then Leslie points out that the Path of the Panther, the show from Carlton Ward Jr., just opened at the FM OPA, and the reception is tonight from 6 to 8 is what Leslie is telling us. So thank you for those two emails that came in. And as we wrap up this segment of the show, perhaps Marcella, maybe you can tell us if there are any meetings that are coming up or any hearings, if any decisions will be made soon. Marcella or Michael could weigh in on that.
Meetings in regards to just Bellmar or in regards to the projects around?
Yeah, so any of the developments, are there hearings or public meetings coming up?
We're waiting on the Mockley Road Village, which is near the Corkscrew Swamp Sanctuary, the Florida Catwalk, and all these public lands. We're waiting because they're also waiting for a 404 permit from the state. And then that's the one that I know of that I'm waiting because I was following up with this permit for a while, and because that really concerns me because that one has the hotspot for the Florida Panthers, and they did so much changes in the county level, and so that's the one that I'm looking and following up on.
Well, I want to thank you.
It's right behind my backyard.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming on WMNF's Tuesday Cafe, Michael and Marcella.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Michael McGrath is Sierra Club Florida lead organizer, and Marcela Zorita is a resident of Eastern Collier County who's active in issues concerning developments that might impact nearby wildlife and her neighbors. And we've been talking about a proposed Collier County development called Bellmar in Florida panther habitat. You're listening to Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan. Right now, we're going to turn to our next topic, and that is Florida water. An effort to get a water referendum on Florida's ballot next year has fallen short, but organizers plan to get the Right to Clean Water Amendment on Florida's 2026 ballot instead. And so joining us right now are Captain Carl Deigert, the chair of the Florida Political Action Committee Florida Right to Clean and Healthy Water, and Joseph Bonaccia, the chair of the Florida Rights of Nature Network. Welcome back to Tuesday Cafe, Carl and Joseph.
My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. I've already gotten to the news that your proposed amendment won't be on next year's ballot, but we should back up a bit and start with, let's say, Carl, if it does eventually become part of the state constitution, what would the Right to Clean and Healthy Waters Amendment say and do in Florida?
So what this will do, it will give legal standing to every citizen in the state of Florida to hold the state executive agencies accountable to make sure that they do the job that we hired them to do. It's not about monetary reward or seeking damages. The courts will compel the state executive agencies to enforce the laws that are already existing to stop harm or to prevent harm to our waters.
Essentially, it would give Floridians the legal standing to sue to protect the right to clean water if a state agency harms or threatens to harm Florida waters?
Yeah, so this is a constitutionally guaranteed fundamental right. This right to clean water will carry the same weight as the freedom of speech, freedom to religion, even to bear arms. It's at that level of law, and it will supersede a lot of the existing regulations and legislature. It also provides a framework for the legislature in their decision-making process. They will have to first reference the state constitutional amendment for clean water in every decision they make regarding water quality throughout the state.
And until recently, you had been gathering signatures trying to get the initiative on next November's ballot. But Joseph, we'll turn to you. In an opinion column last week, you noted that those efforts had fallen short, but that you had plans to take the efforts that you've made so far and push for 2026 instead. Does that give you a better chance to hit the nearly 1 million signatures that you'd need next time?
Yes, it does. We would not be starting from scratch again. I mean, petitions would go to zero, but we have a level of public awareness that we did not have when we launched on Earth Day back in 2022. We would have the public records list of the 115,000 people who have already signed. With adequate funding, we can do a mail campaign and have those folks sign right away. We have also attracted the attention of professionals who think that what we have accomplished on purely volunteer efforts and what was a shoestring budget, quite extraordinary. So they're looking to help us out with their expertise, with sufficient funding. We feel very good about our prospects for 2026.
And you mentioned that the petitions would go to zero. So that brings us to a recent change that was imposed by the Florida legislature to the time frame for signature gathering. How did that impact your efforts, and what was that change that we're talking about?
Okay, well, years ago, prior to 2011, you had 4 years in order to collect the required number of petitions. In 2011, the legislature changed that. They cut it in half. So now we've got 2 years to collect approximately 900,000 petitions. It is an intimidating task, but still doable with sufficient public awareness. The challenge really isn't convincing Floridians to pass a fundamental right to clean and healthy waters. The challenge is simply getting enough of them to know about the petition so they can sign it, so we can qualify and get on the ballot. There certainly is a history in Florida of Floridians supporting environmental initiatives. So we're very confident that once we're on it, we're going to pass with flying colors. It's just getting the resources, the financial resources, the man hours and such to get those 900,000 signed and verified petitions. And the legislature obviously was looking to discourage success in that regard.
That's Joseph Bonassia, chair of the Florida Rights to Nature Network. We're also speaking with Captain Carl Dygert, chair of the Florida Political Action Committee, Florida Right to Clean and Healthy Waters. We're talking about a constitutional amendment push that they're making now for the 2026 ballot for a right to clean water in Florida. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan. And Carl, let me ask you this, that in an opinion article that you wrote in the last year or two, you said that over 9,000 miles of our waterways and 80% of our springs are now classified as impaired. What does that mean?
So through state monitoring, our own state agencies are telling us that these water bodies have become polluted. They like to use the word impaired, but I'm not one for euphemisms. Let's call it what it is. Our waters are unsafe. We have harmful blue-green algae blooms in Lake Okeechobee. Actually, across almost every lake in the state of Florida, we have these blooms now. We have the most polluted lakes in the entire United States most square miles of polluted lakes in the entire United States. So our water quality is at a point of essentially no return. If we don't get a handle on the sources of pollution, we will not be able to reverse the damage that's already been done. The money that the legislature throws into the water quality programs is about remediation. That whole paradigm of trying to fix it needs to stop, and we need to start moving towards prevention. And the only way that's going to happen is if we create this law to compel the agencies to do that very thing, to stop the pollution at the sources.
Our guests are Captain Carl Dygert, chair of the Florida Political Action Committee, Florida Right to Clean and Healthy Waters, and Joseph Bonassia, who is chair of the Florida Rights of Nature Network. We're talking about a constitutional amendment push that they're making for the 2026 ballot. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we're broadcasting from the studios of WMNF in Tampa, and we're live on December 12th. So if you have any thoughts, you can give us a call, 813-239-9663. You can email us at dj@wmnf.org. or text 813-433-0885. Here are a couple of emails that have come in the last few minutes. CP from Palmetto is referring to the previous story, and he says that you will see that CE, which is Collier Enterprises, has been screwing over Florida for decades from oil drilling rights to development. So that's the opinion of CP in Palmetto, talking about our previous topic about the proposed development in Southwest Florida. And Eric from Riverview says the Clean Water Amendment is great. How will this guarantee the state legislature implements it with a track record of the Republican majority not implementing previous amendments? I feel this will never happen. I would have signed the petition had I known about it. Not sure why this is the first time I'm hearing about it. So that's from Eric in Riverview. What can you say, either Carl or Joseph, what's the track record for, and how would you be certain that the Florida legislature would actually implement this amendment if it becomes part of the Florida Constitution?
Well, once it's in,
Go ahead, Joe.
Once it's part of the Constitution, that's the law of the land. State agencies do not have the discretion to ignore the state constitution. This is a fundamental right of the people. A court could compel the state agencies to do what they must do in order to protect the right of the people. That pretty much was a quote that I was using from a court case in New York, one of their first Green Amendment court cases, where the DEP up there was being taken to task by the court. And the judge said, state agencies do not have the discretion to ignore the state constitution. Same thing down here. I also want to note that this is a self-executing law. It does not need any further legislation from the legislature to implement it. When the people pass it, it's effective.
Yeah. I'd like to add to that. The authors of our amendment language, they assembled previous successes and previous failures for constitutional amendments. They went over this language word by word for several months to ensure that it will pass and self-execute without any input from any legislature's action.
You're both part of the Florida Rights of Nature Network. I'd like to find out what that means, rights of nature.
Take that one, Joe.
Okay. Yes, this is actually a global movement. And a couple of years ago, back in 2020, actually, Florida made history when Orange County voters amended their county charter to give legally recognized rights to all their waterways. Every waterway had the right to exist, to flow, to be free of pollution, and to maintain a healthy ecosystem. Right now, nature has no rights, and so it is at a great disadvantage in courts of law. So the thinking behind rights of nature is that, like other rights movements, it would provide the protections we need. It's worth noting that corporations have lots and lots of rights that people have. And it just balances things in the courts for nature to have those rights as well.
So I'd like to point out about the rights of nature success in Orange County. That was enacted by 89% of the voters in Orange County. Bipartisan support for to give rights to waters themselves. That case has been tested, but just prior to the people of Orange County deciding that this was the best law for their community, our own state legislature preempted the creation of rights of nature laws throughout the state about 3 months prior to the Orange County success. So we're now, the folks in Orange County at Speak Up Wekiwa are appealing the decision that is allowing a developer to tear up 115 acres of wetlands in the first test case for rights of nature in the United States. So we're trying to have that preemption reversed, and hopefully that'll happen, because after we accomplish the right to clean water, we hope to extend these environmental protections to nature itself.
Sean, I would like to add to that as well.
Go ahead,
because
Joseph.
it was that preemption that compelled us to launch this initiative to amend the state constitution. That was not our original intention. We were a network of these local initiatives. The legislature put the kibosh on that, which is why we're doing what we're doing now. I think it's also worth noting that the legislature must believe that a rights-based approach to environmental protection would be very effective, or else it would not have enacted that preemption.
Our guests are Joseph Bonassia, chair of the Florida Rights of Nature Network, and Captain Carl R. Dygert, the chair of the Florida Political Action Committee called Florida Right to Clean and Healthy Waters. And we're talking about a constitutional amendment push that they're making for the 2026 ballot. This is Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, and we're broadcasting from the studios of WMNF Tampa. We're live on December 12th, and so we're going to take some calls right now. If you have thoughts about this, you can give us a call at 813-239-9663. You can email dj@wmnf.org, or you can text 813-433-0885. And Carl in Clearwater wants to ask about how the declining water quality impacts Florida businesses. Go ahead, Carl.
So I have personally been affected.
Totally in support of this group and their work. I think we're not spending enough time and energy educating people about the long-term consequences of declining water quality and its effect on business. It's going to have a huge negative effect on business over the next 10, 20 years. Thank you.
if you'd like to go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, so he's absolutely right. I believe water quality is what makes Florida our blue economy. It's the tens of billions of dollars are brought into the state each year because people come to visit and enjoy our clean waters. I personally was financially impacted. The red tide of 2018, I owned a waterfront motel, small mom and pop, just 4 rooms, and in Matlacha, Florida, and from which I conducted boat tours out to the barrier islands of Cayo Costa and Captiva. That red tide event took my businesses to zero. The businesses on Fort Myers Beach, Sanibel, became ghost towns. The employees of these businesses were standing in food lines because they had no wages coming in. Yes, I believe deteriorating water quality will eventually and imminently bring a economic collapse to the state of Florida if we don't get a handle on it.
Sean, I would just add that there was a study done about that 2018-2019 red tide. It cost Southwest Florida $184 million in direct tourist dollars and $305 million indirect dollars. So the fact that poor water quality affects our economies down here is absolutely clear.
And we'll get to more phone calls in a second. So DeAndre and John, hang tight. We'll get to you in a moment. I want to read some of these emails that have been coming in as well. And just remind people that our guests are Captain Carl Dygert, chair of the Florida Political Action Committee, Florida Right to Clean and Healthy Waters, and Joseph Bonassia, the chair of the Florida Rights of Nature Network. David writes in, he asks, would this proposed amendment help to address the problems from leaky septic tanks? And David says he thinks a lot of poo ends up in our aquifer from all the septic tanks in rural areas and cities like Spring Hill. Any thoughts about how leaky septic tanks would be impacted by an amendment like this?
So a municipality that's mainly septic and has not moved to sewering, central sewering, if those septic tanks are harming the local waters, an action, even the municipality could litigate with the state executive agencies to compel them to find the funding to sewer their communities. Again, this is not about seeking damages. It's just and the court could tell that agency, probably the DEP or the Water Management District, they're going to say that they don't have the funding to do this. If we had the funding, they would have done it already, right? So they're going to cry poor. They're going to say that we don't have the money to make these conversions to sewer. The courts will compel these agencies to go find it. Do something, but you got to make this is a fundamental right. It's being violated and you need to fix it. So it's very powerful.
And Sarah from Tampa is asking, do we have to sign a petition in person, a physical petition, or can we sign an online petition? And maybe that would that also leads to a second part of that question, which could be, are you taking petitions now, or is there a certain window at which your petition gathering will start again?
So unfortunately, the state does not permit electronic signatures. So every petition must be a hard copy with what they call a wet signature, blue or black ink. We launched, as I said, back on Earth Day in 2022. We are just now, really at the end of November, suspending our petition gathering efforts. We're not close enough to merit continuing our efforts anymore. But we are, redesigning, retooling a campaign, and we intend to relaunch again in February. So those people who signed petitions over the last 18 months or so, they will have to sign the new petition when it launches again in later on in the winter.
Yeah, our legislature makes this as difficult as possible. All the signatures we've collected to date are now null and void going into the next election cycle. So please, people, if you signed the first time, sign again. We're going to need your signatures again, and I want you to take 5 petitions and hand them out to all your neighbors.
Let's go back to the phone lines. DeAndre's been waiting for a while. Hi, DeAndre. What would you like to say?
I want to thank you and the guests for this forum. It's terribly important. I also want to ask a couple questions. One, is there a history listing, and then there like updates on fronts had on the water when it comes to different governments, whether it's municipal, county, and then state? I'm thinking about construction issues on the Hillsborough and downtown now a few years ago, but then as well, it seemed like the governor at the time a few years ago also raised the rate of pollution permitted in waters, whether it were standing or flowing waters. And then secondly, are there any interesting renewable industries like the floating farms or the such that has caught your organization's attention that you feel is worth mentioning for people to kind of get excited about?
All right, thanks, DeAndre.
Projects across the state working to improve water quality. And there's a lot of good stuff out there, technology. The problem with technology and ways to fix our waters is that the technology is very difficult to scale, to filter, or to sequester the nutrients from trillions of gallons of water. So there are technologies that work, but they really cannot be scaled to the level soon enough, quick enough, efficiently enough to make a difference. We have to stop the pollution at the sources.
Thanks for the call, DeAndre. And a reminder that if you're listening live on December 12th, you can call us at 813-239-9663. You can email dj@wmnf.org, or you can text 813-433-0885. And while we're one of the questions that I wanted to ask our guests here has to do with a water battle that our audience may be familiar with, and that's the application for a permit to take about 1 million gallons of water a day from the Ginnie Springs complex in North Florida so that it can be bottled for sale by a company that's now known as Blue Triton, but it used to be called Nestle. The Florida Springs Council tweeted recently that the Suwannee River Water Management District will vote this morning on whether to follow a recent recommendation by a judge who ruled in favor of the company, Seven Springs, to allow the pumping. I was watching a little bit of that meeting before the show here. I saw a county commissioner up there get up and say that taking 1 million gallons of water a day out of the Suwannee River was like taking a teaspoon out of the river. That's what this county commissioner had said. So let me ask my guests, what could that mean for water flow and the quality of water and the environment near Ginnie Springs in North Florida?
Well, we already know that it's having a detrimental impact, which seems common sense to most everybody. It certainly resonated with 19,000 residents, citizens who made public comments about this particular case. The vast majority were in opposition to this permit. One of the things that is interesting about this case is that the Florida Springs Council argued two things. Number one, that this level of consumption is known to hurt the aquifer and the springs and therefore would not be in the public interest. And number two, that these 19,000 comments represented the public interest. The court rejected both of those arguments. What is also particularly interesting here is that in Florida, we do not have a good definition of what the public interest is. It is not defined in our state constitution. Our legislature has not defined it, nor has our Department of Environmental Protection. So it was a surprising, I think, decision that came down from the court, surprising certainly to those 19,000 people.
So when an environmental resources permit is intended to be issued by the Florida Department of Protection, there's a public hearing or there's a public comment period before a DOA or a administrative hearing, a judge. And they always apply this concept of public interest. But the legislature's never defined it. And then when they apply it, those that need to meet the public interest have no definitions or hard facts that they need to prove that they've met it. I've been recently involved in a case in Cape Coral, Florida, to prevent harming of the waters through the removal of a boat lock. And the 7 points of public interest are: will the activity adversely affect public health and safety? Will the activity adversely affect the conservation of fish and wildlife, including endangered species? Will the activity affect navigation, the flow of water, leading to harmful erosion? And will it adversely affect fishing recreation values and marine productivity, such as scalloping and oystering? And is the activity permanent or temporary? So that's just 5 of there's 7 points that they use. But it's real easy to apply to Jenny Springs that overconsumption of these waters that are finite, they're not infinite, is not in the public interest. But the DEP moves ahead and issues a permit. And what permits do is make that illegal activity of taking that water for profit and greed and making it an illegal activity. That's what our permitting system does.
Well, let's try to squeeze in a phone call here from John in Port Richey. Hi, John. What would you like to say?
Hey, real quick, 2 things. I like the idea that the environment is a person. So would that be a federal amendment or a state amendment? The second thing is, I don't know if you're familiar with these conservative courts using this concept, this legal concept of it's not historical evidence that these things existed, and they've been overturning various laws based on this historical reference, and they're going back to this constitutional originality stuff. So where in the Constitution does it say corporations are people? Where is that an original text or original thought by the Founding Fathers? And can we challenge that based on that historical precedent?
All right. Thank you, John. And we have to make sure we separate the ideas of the federal Constitution from the state Constitution of Florida, which is what your amendment would be, Carl and Joseph.
Yes, so
correct. And the gentleman caller is talking about granting rights to nature, and that there are other countries that have it in their federal constitution. We do not. There are some places in the country, townships and municipalities that have done it. No state constitutions that I know of at this point. They could be there. They would be very powerful if placed there.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming on, but before I let you go, why don't you let us know where people can find out more about the Florida Right to Clean and Healthy Waters and the petition drive that you'll be starting again in February. Where can people find that information?
They can go to FloridaRightToCleanWater.org.
And we're going to put a link to that on the WMNF.org website. So I want to thank you very much for coming back on WMNF's Tuesday Cafe, Carl and Joseph.
Thanks for bringing the awareness. We really appreciate it.
Yeah,
thank you for having us.
Thanks so much for coming on. Captain Carl Dygert is the chair of the Florida Political Action Committee called Florida Right to Clean and Healthy Waters. And Joseph Bonassia is chair of the Florida Rights of Nature Network. They hope to add a question to Florida's 2026 ballot for a constitutional right to clean water. And I also want to thank our previous guests, Michael McGrath and Marcella Zurita. And if you missed either of these interviews, the videos should be published on WMNF.org early this afternoon. I want to thank our phone screener, John Dunn. You've been listening to Tuesday Cafe. I'm Sean Canan, News and Public Affairs Director at WMNF Tampa. During this time slot tomorrow, Shelley Reback will host Midpoint. Coming up next is Wavemakers with Janet and Tom Scherberger. Their Wavemaker today is Michelle Detweiler, President and CEO of Park Center for Disabilities in Pinellas County, a nonprofit. This has been Tuesday Cafe, coming to you live on December 12, 2023 from the studios of WMNF Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota, and Lakeland. In this time slot next week, we're going to hear from the supervisors of 3 local school districts. So I hope you stay tuned. I hope you tune back in to Tuesday Cafe next Tuesday at 10. Thanks so much for listening and supporting WMNF.org.